Adolf Hitler told the youth bearing his name that they were to be the paladins of his brave new world. But his promises were dust. His Reich was rotten to the core. Millions were to die even before discovering life, and the survivors reaped the whirlwind of despair and disillusionment. Hitler took from Germany's children their promise and enthusiasm. In return, he poisoned their innocence and bred a band of idealistic killers, leading them towards a hell of his own making. A strong youth movement existed in Germany long before the Nazi Party was founded. Established in the 1890s, it was known as the Wandervogel, a male-only movement featuring a back-to-nature theme. Its members longed for a Jugendkultur, a culture of youth, led by youth, in which they would be truly valued. They wanted something greater to believe in than the values of their parents. The movement grew rapidly from 1900 to 1914, attracting the attention and grudging admiration of the mainstream political and religious establishment in Germany. These soon created their own competing youth groups, which copied the main ideals of the Wandervogel. Most German youths were quickly caught up in the war mania that swept Germany in 1914. They enthusiastically went off to the battlefields of World War I, romantically assuming the experience would mold them into new men. In reality, they died by the millions, cut down by the machinery of modern warfare. Germany's total defeat in 1918 plunged the country into political and social chaos. Among the multitude of post-war political organizations hoping to lead Germany into the future was the German Workers' Party. Founded in 1919 in Bavaria, it had been taken over by the young Adolf Hitler. In 1920, he renamed it the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi Party. That same year, Hitler authorized the formation of a youth league of the party under the control of his stormtrooper organization, the SA, or Sturmabteilung. In 1923, Hitler was imprisoned in Landsberg Castle following the fiasco of the Beer Hall Putsch. After his release 6 months later, he announced he would refound the Nazi Party and invited all German nationalists to join the revitalized organization with him as its undisputed leader. The new youth wing of the party was led by Kurt Gruber, a 21-year-old law student who had joined the Nazis in 1923. Gruber was a skilled organizer. He introduced the first Hitler Youth uniforms, featuring a brown shirt and black shorts and a redesigned armband. This sported a swastika superimposed on a white diamond, with a white horizontal stripe added. This uniform pleased many of the SA troopers, who had taken offense at being confused with the young fledgling wing of the organization. Hitler was impressed by Gruber's zeal and organizational talent. The Greater German Youth Movement under Gruber became the sole official youth organization of the Nazi Party, and was even allowed to retain a degree of independence from the NSDAP leadership. By exploiting adolescent rebellion and targeting the urban working-class youth, Gruber increased membership from 1,000 to 10,000 in 2 years. In 1926, at the suggestion of Gauleiter Julius Streicher, Gruber's Greater German Youth Movement was renamed the Hitler Jugend Bund der Deutschen Arbeiterjugend. Thus, the Hitler Jugend, or HJ, was born, with Kurt Gruber as its first leader. All other National Socialist youth associations, including groups in Austria, were now absorbed into the Hitler Youth. Although Gruber was enjoying much success, an ambitious young upstart was soon competing for his position. Balder von Schirach had joined the Nazi Party at 18 after first hearing Hitler speak. Chirac was the son of a wealthy Prussian army captain and an American mother, whose ancestors included 2 signatories of the Declaration of Independence. Educated at the best German schools, he quickly came to the attention of Hitler. The Nazi hierarchy tended to poke fun at him because of his upper-class schoolboy looks. But young Chirac and his wealthy family enjoyed Hitler's friendship and confidence. The Führer made many social visits to his home. In July 1928, Chirac was appointed leader of the Nazi Student Association and was made an advisor for student affairs at Nazi Party headquarters in Munich. The ambitious young Chirac soon set his sights on gaining control of the Hitler Youth as well. While he was a student leader, Chirac had proven himself an able organizer and propagandist. As an early member of the Nazi Party, he was among Hitler's inner circle. He fostered links with Ernst Röhm, the burly and influential SA leader. This association did Chirac's cause a great deal of good, in spite of slanderous rumors about his relationship with the homosexual Röhm. Hitler had a notable weakness for sycophants. The Nazi inner circle constantly tried to outdo each other in heaping superlatives upon their leader, but none was better at it than Chirac. A self-styled romantic poet, he described Hitler in his sentimental verse as "this genius raising the stars," and stated that loyalty is everything, and everything is the love of Adolf Hitler. In October 1931, Nazi Party headquarters suddenly announced that it had accepted Gruber's resignation. In reality, he never actually submitted one. After 3 years of intense work building the Hitler Youth Organization, Gruber was gone, replaced by the 24-year-old Chirac. That same month, Chirac was appointed to the newly created office of Reichsjugendführer, Reich Youth Leader, directly responsible to the chief of the SA. Membership of the HJ proliferated during the final years of the Weimar Republic. The uniformed Hitler Youth, like the brown-shirted SA, were a visible force in the streets, campaigning for Hitler and conducting frequent propaganda marches. Street battles between communist youths and Hitler youth occurred regularly. They battled with fists and sticks, but increasingly resorted to firearms. Between 1931 and 1933, 23 Hitler youth were killed in the streets. In April 1933, within 3 months of Hitler being appointed Chancellor, von Chirac eliminated all 400 competing youth organizations, large and small, throughout Germany. By the time of the forced merger, 3/4 of young Germans belonged to some type of organized youth organization. On the 17th of June 1933, Hitler promoted Chirac to Jugendführer der Deutschen Reich, youth leader of Germany. Answerable only to Hitler, Chirac was now head of all youth activities in Germany. In 1933, the HJ membership exploded from 120,000 in January to 2.3 million at the year's end. Between 1933 and 1936, the last year when membership was still voluntary, the total rose to 5 million.
Der Führer gab uns aus der Einsamkeit dieser Zelle heraus einst das Buch, mein Kampf. Ihr sollt in eurem ganzen zukünftigen Leben aus diesem Buch...
The structure of the HJ now had to be systematized. Children aged 6 to 10 were allowed to hang around the older boys and participate informally. Between 10 to 14, boys belonged to the Jungvolk. Then, from 14 to 18, they became members of the HJ proper. Each boy was given a performance booklet recording his progress in athletics and Nazi indoctrination throughout his time in the HJ. It was at this time that Heinrich Himmler, chief of the SS, began to take an interest in the HJ. For the Reichsführer, a close relationship between the SS and German youth would ensure the triumph of the Aryan race, so fulfilling the ancient Germanic prophecies. As a result, the history of the two movements would be inextricably linked until the final twilight of the Reich. One of the first signs of this alliance was the establishment of a pseudo-religious rite known as the Solstice Festival. This ceremony of fire and quasi-pagan ritual first took place during the winter of 1935 on the Brocken in the Harz Mountains, followed the next summer on the Zugspitze in the Bavarian Alps. Thereafter the SS and HJ took turns in conducting this cycle of ceremonies, so creating a type of priestly tradition. Schirach was to pursue a closer relationship with Himmler, since his earlier association with Rome had become life-threatening during the SA purges in 1934. An alliance with the SS leader would, he felt, enable him to recover his position within the party. Hitler wanted to create the ideal physical specimen and wished the state to raise national standards of health. Child labor was prohibited, mothers and children nurtured, and bodily efficiency was to be increased by compulsory gymnastics and sports. Hitler told the HJ that they were to be slim and slender as greyhounds, tough as leather, and hard as Krupp steel. The training of the intellect was to take a back seat. The Nazis tapped the energy of youth, making physical and combative sports a desirable social activity. But the revival of sports was also part of a nationalist revival, which fostered the spread of chauvinism. To the HJ, sport was not an end in itself, but was used to warp the world-view of the young. Physical exercise expressed a patriotic spirit and a spirit of manliness, as did camping, hiking, games in the open, and youthful pranks. Sport was about leadership and following, subordination and service, fidelity and virility. The individual striving for excellence in the service of a greater good was regarded as superior to English notions of fair play. Above all, physical perfection was a means of demonstrating German racial superiority. On joining the organization, boys spent a few months on probation while undergoing training by older HJ members. A test was then given in which they had to recite all the verses of the Horst Wessel song and answer basic questions concerning Nazi ideology and the history of the party. They also had to prove physical fitness by running 60 meters in 12 seconds and take part in a cross-country hike lasting a day and a half. A Mutprobe, courage test, was then given, such as jumping from the first or second story ledge into a large canvas held by older HJ. After passing all of the tests, each boy was entitled to wear the brown shirt bearing the Jungfolk insignia, with a leather shoulder strap. Above all, they were given the almost sacred Hitler Youth dagger, bearing the legend Blut und Ehre, blood and honor. The program prescribed for his minions by the flabby and slightly effeminate von Schirach was rigorously structured. Running, jumping, swimming, discus and potato masher throwing, ball playing and gymnastics were required activities for all, regardless of ability. At least 4 hours during the week and 3 weekends per month were dedicated to these endeavors. Younger, weaker boys got pummeled while platoon leaders stood by or even encouraged the fighting. Ripped shirts, along with scrapes and bruises, were common during these field exercises, which were intended to toughen them up. Weakness was risible, and the plight of those who showed it was to be laughed at. Youth training became more overtly military during the late 1930s. Every HJ member was issued with an official war book entitled The Bridge with the Red Tower. This instructed the little soldiers on the finer points of field tactics and on the interrelationship of the fighting arms. Target shooting and map reading, together with camouflage techniques, were also to be perfected. Every activity had to have an obvious military corollary. The Hitler Youth also included special paramilitary formations for boys. The Flieger HJ, in which aviation enthusiasts built gliders, participated in annual glider flying competitions, visited Luftwaffe facilities, and went for rides in fighters and bombers. The Motor HJ, for boys 16 and older, in which they acquired their driver's license and learned to ride motorcycles. And the Marine HJ, in which they obtained sailing certificates, learned river navigation, and participated in naval exercises aboard German training ships. In September 1934, the HJ made a notable appearance at the annual Nuremberg rally, an event well documented in Leni Riefenstahl's propaganda film, Triumph of the Will. A 10-minute sequence shows Hitler's emotional appearance before the enthralled assembly. The electric atmosphere is palpable. The devotion is total. Many Hitler youths now regarded Hitler as their Führer God, and even recited prayers such as, Führer, my Führer, given me by God, protect and preserve my life forever. Savior of Germany in its time of need, I thank you for my daily bread. Be with me for eternity. Do not leave me. Führer, my faith, my light, hail to my Führer.
Mein Führer, nach Ihrem Befehl, mein Führer, steht hier.
Following an impassioned introduction by von Schirach, Hitler speaks to the assembled ranks.
Ohne jeweils zusammenzubrechen. Denn was wir auch heute schaffen und was wir tun,
regardless of whatever we create and do, we shall pass away, but in you Germany will live on. And I know it cannot be otherwise, because you are the flesh of our flesh and the blood of our blood.
Aus dem Nichts hochgezogen haben, in euren Fäusten halten müssen. Und ich weiß, das kann nicht anders sein, denn ihr seid Fleisch, von unserem Fleisch und Blut, von unserem Blut, und in eurem jungen Gehirn brennt derselbe Geist, der uns beherrscht. Ihr könnt nicht anders sein, als mit uns verbunden. Und wenn die großen Kolonnen unserer Bewegung heute siegen durch Deutschland marschieren, dann weiß ich, ihr schließt euch den Kolonnen an. Und wir wissen, vor uns liegt Deutschland, in uns marschiert Deutschland und hinter uns kommt Deutschland.
In a somewhat more revealing address in 1938, he outlined the future for German youth. When these boys enter our organization at the age of 10, it is often the first time in their lives that they get to breathe and feel fresh air. 4 years later, they come from the Jungvolk into the Hitler Youth. After we have kept them there for another 4 years, they will never return to the old ways of class and status-ridden society. Instead, we take them straight into the party or into the Labour Front, the SA or the SS, and so on. And if after another 2 years they still haven't become complete National Socialists, then they go into the Labour service. There they are polished for 6 or 7 months. And if they still have any class consciousness or pride of status, then 2 years in the Wehrmacht will sort them out. When they come back after 2, 3 or 4 years, we take them straight into the SA or the SS, so that there will be no backsliding. They will never be free again as long as they live. Females too had their assigned role in the German future. Girls aged 10 to 14 joined the Jungmädel, and from 14 to 18 belonged to the BDM, the commonly used abbreviation for Bund Deutscher Mädel, League of German Girls. They too enthusiastically adopted the National Socialist viewpoint, though they were assigned duties in keeping with Nazi ideas on the role of females. That role was summed up by an old German slogan, Kinder, Kirche, Küche, or children, church, kitchen, which was especially popular during the Nazi era. The primary role of young females in Nazi Germany was to give birth to healthy, racially pure boys. All women's organizations were thus regarded as auxiliaries, ranking below their male counterparts. The girls wore a schoolgirl-like uniform of skirts and blouses, along with army-style hiking boots. They presented a curious mixture of the enticing and the repressive, which sums up the Nazi attitude to sex generally. Their required duties were regular attendance at club premises and sports meetings, participation in journeys and camp life. They had to memorize data about the Führer and his henchmen, together with all the other plethora of facts, figures, songs, and dogma that made up the corpus of Reich philosophy and history. Girls mature more quickly than boys, and after the age of 14, they did not find the company of the parallel HJ organizations all that stimulating. The special Glaube und Schönheit, or Faith and Beauty program, was created to counter the fall in interest. Established in January 1938, the course was open only to those between 17 and 21. Its rationale was to create a master race of perfect Hausfrauen. This was to be realized by cultivating the virtues of personal hygiene, housekeeping, education, and home decorating. The core skills were supplemented by intensive physical activity, especially dance and gymnastics, fashion consciousness, and feminine aesthetics in general. The ideal League type exemplified early 19th century notions of the essence of maidenhood. Girls who infringed the code by perming their hair instead of wearing the ubiquitous plaids or Gretchen wreath of braids had it ceremoniously shaved off as punishment. The scheme enjoyed less than qualified success. As the war progressed, faith and beauty's ideals of grace and charm, far removed from reality, lost its attraction in the deadly seriousness of daily life. Work on the land was a key element in National Socialist philosophy. The Nazis were in love with the idea of the noble peasant. For Himmler, the tiller of the soil was the source of all that was good, strong, and beautiful. One of the more permanent preoccupations of the party was designed to alleviate the effects of urbanization. Many youth leaders believed they could halt the universally condemned flight from the land. In October 1934, the Reich's Land Service, Landsdienst or LD, was introduced. Using the slogan, blood and soil, it offered young city dwellers the opportunity to experience life on German farms. All HJ and BDM members were expected to participate, helping to bring in the harvest while learning the value of hard labor and the simple life. Each spring, groups of HJ Land Service volunteers descended on the farms, many of them to escape unemployment. Living in communal camps, they were paid 9 Reichsmarks per month. When the harvesting was over, the LD group split up. Some went to leadership schools. Others became seasonal thespians, traveling around the countryside entertaining and propagating the blood and soil ideology. Participants in the Landsdienst were supposed to be locked into the rhythm of the countryside. Desirable characters could be forged on the anvils of severe discipline, simplicity of lifestyle, and hard work. City youths who discovered a natural way of life in the country were expected to stay there, founding families and helping to increase the rural population. Demand for female workers also rose. The Reichsjugend leadership set up 8-week re-education camps to help urban girls adjust to farming tasks. In the 2 years up to 1938, 10,000 girls aged 17 and older went through these BDM camps. Parents proved strongly resistant to letting their offspring work on the land, both because it was viewed as a dead-end career option and due to increasing numbers of pregnancies among the land girls. Eventually, land service was made compulsory, and during the war, the proportion of women working the soil rose dramatically. Another of the Landsdienst aims, which was actively encouraged by Himmler, was to resettle the occupied territories. As von Schirach's successor, Arthur Axmann, put it, "The wide acres of the East, which the German soldier is buying with his blood, must be occupied and exploited by German youths into the farthest future." This program eventually broke down due to the increasing demands on male resources to fight. and by the shrinking of Nazi territory itself. The Nazis established 3 types of elite schools, which were separate from the traditional German school system. Their primary purpose was the training of National Socialist leaders of the future. The Adolf Hitler Schule were run by the Hitler Youth Organization. The Napolas, National Political Institutes of Education, and the Ordensbergen, Order Castles, were both run by the Nazi Party. There were eventually 10 Adolf Hitler schools. Boys entered from the Jungvolk at the age of 12 and underwent 6 years of intensive, highly disciplined leadership training under Spartan conditions. Top-rated graduates of these schools were eligible for the exclusive Ordensbergen, where they trained for another 3 years. After passing through the system, they would be ready to assume high-level positions in the Nazi Party. It was from these Ordensbergens steeped in Teutonic mythology that Hitler hoped would emerge a violently active, dominating, brutal youth, indifferent to pain, without weakness or tenderness. The Hitler Youth was not an isolated phenomenon, as foreign fascist youth organizations proliferated during the 1930s. They were most prominent in Spain, Italy, and the Balkans, but could be found all over the globe. Chirac sought to exert influence and stimulate the organization of youth in foreign and occupied territories of Europe, or wherever German minorities were to be found. The United States had a prominent German-speaking community, some 5 million strong. The overtly Nazi Amerika Deutscher Volksbund, founded by Fritz Kuhn, had its own youth movement. Modeled on the HJ, it had similar uniforms and training practices. On September the 1st, 1939, Hitler's armies invaded Poland, starting 6 years of war. The Hitler Youth would come to participate fully in the conflict, eventually drawing even the Jungvolk into combat roles. At the beginning of 1939, about 7.3 million, or 82% of young Germans, belonged to the Hitler Youth, making it the largest such organization in the world. On the 25th of March, 1939, membership was made compulsory for all children. Any remaining holdouts were conscripted into the organization amid warnings to parents that their children would be taken from them and placed in orphanages unless they enrolled. By the outbreak of war, membership had risen to 8.8 million. The war returned a sense of urgency to the daily activities of the Hitler Youth. The organization had experienced a slump after 1936, when participation had become mandatory. For many young Germans, HJ meetings and activities had simply become part of the weekly routine. Since the beginning of the war, Hitler Youths had been functioning as air raid wardens and anti-aircraft flak gun assistants in Berlin and other cities. British air raids on Berlin began in August 1940 in retaliation for the Germans' bombing of London. The Hitler Youth was now in the front line. The first 1,000-bomber raid occurred over Cologne in May 1942. In that month, Axmann persuaded Hitler to set up pre-military training camps, which all boys between the ages of 16 and 18 were forced to attend. The SS persuaded the HJ to reserve to them exclusively 1/5 of the product of these camps. In this preparation for combat, especially in the camps run by the SS, German adolescents received a form of training heavily laced with psychological brainwashing. War was taught as a struggle of competing ideologies, culminating in victory or annihilation. The type of soldier produced under this fight or die indoctrination largely explains the continuing Nazi war effort, even when most outsiders and an increasing number of insiders knew Germany's cause was lost. During the 3 weeks of mandatory war training, the boys learned how to handle German infantry weapons, including various pistols, machine guns, hand grenades, and Panzerfaust anti-tank weapons. The Army High Command and the SS were in constant competition for the best recruits. Both organizations assigned veterans to HJ administrative posts, primarily as a means of recruitment.
Wir sind dann auch
They regaled their wide-eyed audiences with the perils and thrills of combat. They reinforced the will to fight the Bolshevik hordes and the Jew-backed Western powers. These Pied Pipers did all they could to produce the cannon fodder for the Reich war machine. The results were impressive. Army leaders were the first to acknowledge the achievements of the HJ in preparing recruits for the battlefield. Departing from traditional methods, the HJ tailored paramilitary training to the particular needs and potential of 16 and 17-year-olds. With the exception of a few coarse SS veterans, there were no hard-bitten drill sergeant types in the training camps. Most cadre members were sensitive young soldiers with substantial HJ experience. German youth was in effect training itself. The camps also served to eliminate class distinctions. Boys from town and city, volunteer and conscript, were thrown in together. The soldiers that were turned out fought with greater professional skill, resourcefulness, and independent initiative than their enemy counterparts. Between the spring of 1942 and 1945, every German volunteer and draftee filtered through the HJ training schemes before he donned field grey or SS camouflage. But although he was better trained than his opponent, he was also more prone to embrace the barbarity of battle. By the beginning of 1943, Hitler's armies were stretched to the limit, battling the combined forces of the Soviet Union, the United States, Britain, and other allies. By this time, every able-bodied German who could fight was needed in the armed services. But the flak batteries still had to operate. The slack was taken up by the Hitler Youth, who had already unofficially graduated from running messages and assisting the gunners to manning batteries in their entirety. Following each bombing raid, the Hitler Youth assisted in neighborhood cleanups and helped relocate bombed-out civilians. They knocked on doors looking for unused rooms in undamaged houses or apartments. Occupants refusing to let in the new tenants were reported to the local police and could likely expect a visit from the Gestapo. The war would only end with the unconditional surrender of Germany and its Axis partners, as stated by President Franklin Roosevelt at the Casablanca Conference in January 1943. In February, Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels retaliated by issuing a German declaration of total war. Amid a dwindling supply of manpower, the existence of an entire generation of ideologically pure boys, raised as Nazis, eager to fight for the fatherland and even die for the Führer, could not be ignored. The result was the formation of the 12th SS Panzer Division, Hitler Jugend. A recruitment drive began, drawing principally on 17-year-old volunteers. However, younger members of 16 and under eagerly joined. During July and August 1943, 10,000 recruits arrived at the training camp in Beverloo, Belgium. To fill out the HJ division with enough experienced soldiers and officers, Waffen-SS veterans were drafted from the Russian front. Many were from the elite Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler. The Wehrmacht assigned 50 former Hitler Youth leaders as officers for the division. The remaining shortfall of squad and section leaders was filled with Hitler Youth members who had demonstrated leadership aptitude during HJ paramilitary training. The division was placed under the command of 35-year-old Generalmajor Fritz Wick, who had been a Hitler Youth before 1933. By the spring of 1944, training was complete. The HJ Panzer Division, now fully trained and equipped, conducted divisional maneuvers, observed by General Heinz Guderian and Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt. Both senior officers admired their enthusiasm and expressed approval at the proficiency achieved by the young troops in such a short time. The division was transferred to Hasselt, Belgium, in anticipation of the Allied invasion of northern France. A few days before the invasion, SS Reichsführer Heinrich Himmler visited the division. The 12th SS Panzer Division was officially named the Hitler Youth, but was often known as the Baby Division, because the average age of the soldiers was only 18. On D-Day, June 6, 1944, Hitler-Jugend was one of 3 divisions held in reserve by Hitler as the Allies stormed the beaches at Normandy. The 8J's baptism of fire would come against an enemy with overwhelming air superiority and which would soon have nearly unlimited artillery support. The Allies, for their part, were about to have their first encounter with perhaps the most fanatical fighters in the SS. By the end of its first month in battle, 60% of the HJ division was knocked out of action, with 20% killed and the rest wounded and missing. Divisional Commander Witt was killed by a direct hit on his headquarters from a British warship. Command then passed to Kurt Meyer, nicknamed Panzer Meyer, who at the age of 33 became the youngest divisional commander in the entire German armed forces. Over 9,000 had been lost in Normandy and Falaise. The division was reconstituted with even younger and still eager volunteers, though it had to be fleshed out with a hodgepodge of conscripts. The division participated in the failed Battle of the Bulge in Belgium, and in 1945 played its part in the abortive attempt to recapture Budapest. On May the 8th, 1945, the 12th SS Panzer Division, Hitler-Jugend, surrendered to the American 7th Army. It numbered just 455 soldiers and 1 tank. Hitler's Germany fought to the very last, utilizing every available human and material resource. In September 1944, Arthur Axmann proclaimed, "As the 6th year of war begins, Adolf Hitler's youth stands prepared to fight resolutely and with dedication for the freedom of their lives and their future. We say to them, you must decide whether you want to be the last of an unworthy race, despised by future generations, or whether you want to be a part of a new time, marvelous beyond all imagination." On September the 25th, 1944, anticipating the invasion of the fatherland, the Volkssturm was formed under the overall command of Heinrich Himmler. Every available male aged 16 to 60 was conscripted into this new army and trained to use the Panzerfaust. Objections to using even younger boys were bypassed. Himmler and Axmann, among others, also had plans for an army of young werewolves who would terrorize the occupying forces and so prolong the fight of National Socialism. The idea was stillborn, as Axmann's army of 5,000 underage soldiers fell in the battle for Berlin. Their Führer took his own way out. With Hitler's death, the children who had been taught to worship the god of National Socialism were released from their chains of obligation. They awoke as if from a sleep. The optimism and energy of Hitler's youthful followers fueled his insane dreams. They placed absolute trust in an evil manipulator who utterly abused their faith, and they were left alone after many had made the ultimate sacrifice. The Nazi legacy to the children of Germany was a generation whose innocence had been taken away. Hitler and his followers had stolen their childhood and their lives.